Carl Jung, the shocking truth about awakening your third eye. As the ancient saying goes, when the eye is opened, the veil of illusion is lifted. In this video on spiritual wisdom, we'll uncover Carl Jung's shocking truth about awakening your third eye, a gateway not just to seeing the world differently, but to seeing yourself with radical clarity. The third eye is more than mysticism. It is a path to personal growth, self-discovery, and true happiness when you learn to apply its principles in your daily life. So let me ask you, have you ever felt like there's more hidden beneath the surface of what you see? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your perspective may inspire someone else's awakening. 1. What the third eye really is. The third eye is not a fantasy. It is a deeper form of perception that allows us to see beyond the surface of reality, beyond appearances, masks, and egoic illusions. In a world where most people are trained to look outward, to chase status, beauty, or validation, the third eye turns our gaze inward and reveals what's been hidden all along: the truth. When truly activated, it does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. Clarity so sharp, it cuts through denial, projection, and the roles we play. Carl Jung never used the term third eye, but he spoke of its essence. He described it as the gateway to the unconscious, the place where true self-awareness begins and where all spiritual awakening takes root. For Jung, the unconscious wasn't a chaotic force to fear, but a deep reservoir of hidden truths, archetypes, and transformative power. It's the place that holds the shadow and the light, and only by facing both can we ever begin to see clearly. Opening the third eye means stepping into that territory, into the unfiltered self, and shedding illusions, even the ones we love. This is not a new concept. Ancient traditions across time and culture have pointed to this same inner vision. In Hinduism, the Ajna chakra located between the eyebrows is believed to be the center of intuition, insight, and spiritual guidance. In Buddhism, the path to enlightenment requires mindful seeing, the discipline to look past illusions of permanence and ego. In ancient Egypt, the eye of Horus symbolized divine vision, healing, and protection, offering insight that transcends physical sight. All of these traditions, in their own language, gesture toward the same truth: that beyond our two eyes is a higher form of sight, a sight that doesn't just observe, but understands. Not just sees people, but sees their pain, patterns, and projections. Not just sees events, but reads energy and meaning. And in today's world, flooded with distraction and shallow validation, this inner vision has never been more necessary. Yet most people fear it. Why? Because once your third eye opens, you can no longer pretend. You can't unsee the truth. You can't lie to yourself about who you are, who you've become, or who you've allowed into your life. It's no longer possible to blame the world for your wounds, because you now see how you participated in them. You begin to notice how your fears shaped your relationships, how your insecurities picked your partners, and how your unresolved past wrote your present story. This is the price of spiritual awakening, awareness. But with awareness comes freedom. The freedom to rewrite, to heal, to choose differently, and to rise into a version of yourself that aligns with your soul instead of your survival patterns. And this freedom is the essence of true spirituality. Because spirituality isn't about escaping life, it's about finally being present for it. It's about seeing everything with eyes unclouded by ego, fear, or illusion. When the third eye opens, life changes not because the external world shifts, but because your perception does. You stop chasing what doesn't matter. You stop reacting to noise. You start discerning energy. You feel alignment instead of approval. You trust your intuition over trends. And suddenly, what once captivated you feels empty, and what once felt invisible, the quiet, the truth, the soul feels like everything. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The third eye is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious. It's the light that shines into your hidden corners and brings choice where once there was only compulsion. This is not magic. It's mastery. It's the deepest act of remembering who you are beneath what you were taught to be. And in that remembering, you begin to see not with your eyes, but with your essence. That is vision. That is awakening. That is the silent revolution of the third eye. If you're ready to awaken your true inner vision, comment below. My third eye is opening to truth and wisdom. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and hit the bell so you never miss a new insight. 2. The science behind it, the pineal gland. The pineal gland, often referred to as the biological third eye, is more than just a sleep regulator. It is the gateway to spiritual awakening and higher states of awareness that most people go their entire lives without truly accessing. Deep within the brain, this tiny pinecone-shaped gland sits quietly, but when activated, it has the potential to open an entirely new dimension of perception, one that dissolves illusion and reveals the truth hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. While scientists acknowledge its role in producing melatonin, some researchers also suggest that the pineal gland may be responsible for producing DMT, known as the spirit molecule, a substance linked to profound mystical experiences, near-death states, and heightened spiritual clarity. These aren't just hallucinations or tricks of the mind. Many describe them as moments when the veil between the physical and spiritual world becomes transparent, allowing us to glimpse a deeper reality that the logical mind cannot comprehend. This is not fantasy, but a direct encounter with the inner world Carl Jung referred to when he spoke of the unconscious as a sacred reservoir of symbols, archetypes, and raw human potential that yearns to be integrated. What's remarkable is that you don't need to consume anything or escape your life to reach these states. Ancient spiritual traditions across cultures discovered natural ways to activate the pineal gland through intentional practices. Meditation pulls your awareness inward, creating space for inner silence to rise. Breathwork enhances your energy flow, oxygenates your brain, and begins to release blockages that keep your consciousness trapped in fear or repetition. Chanting sacred sounds like Om vibrates the cranial bones and directly stimulates the gland, while silence itself pure, uninterrupted stillness can become the most powerful practice of all, creating the internal spaciousness necessary for the third eye to awaken. These are not abstract rituals. They are spiritual technologies designed to elevate your perception, to make you more aware of the energetic and emotional layers shaping your decisions, your relationships, and your destiny. As you walk through life, this awakened inner eye allows you to see beyond appearances. You begin to sense the energy behind people's words, notice patterns in your experiences, and understand that every coincidence is a form of guidance. You no longer live on autopilot because you begin to observe the world not from your ego, but from your essence. Spirituality becomes a lived experience, not just a concept. And spiritual development, then, is the ongoing journey of refining that perception, cleansing it from fear, illusion, and conditioning, so that your choices become aligned with who you truly are beneath the roles you play. This process isn't about escaping reality. It's about seeing it clearly. It's about recognizing when something is energetically misaligned, when you're out of rhythm with your intuition, and when you're being called to shift. When your third eye is open, you're not just reacting to life, you're in dialogue with it. This clarity empowers you. It changes the way you speak, the way you move through challenges, the way you manifest what you need. You're no longer chasing life. You're magnetizing it through your presence. And this presence is what Carl Jung described in his exploration of the inner world, a state where we are no longer controlled by the unconscious, but consciously relating to it, working with its symbols, its dreams, its wounds, and its wisdom. The pineal gland becomes the torchlight that reveals what was hidden in the shadows. It brings the unconscious forward and offers you a choice to remain blind or learn to see with new eyes. In this way, spiritual awakening is not an escape, it is a homecoming, a return to the truth that was always within you, waiting to be remembered. 3. What happens when it opens? When your third eye begins to open, it doesn't ask for permission or prepare you gently. It disrupts you with truth. This is not a gentle nudge into spirituality, but a piercing awakening into intelligence that has long been buried beneath illusions. Suddenly, what once made sense no longer does. The job you chased, the relationships you clung to, the approval you desperately sought, all begin to dissolve under the weight of a deeper knowing. Carl Jung, though he didn't use the term third eye, understood this inner revolution. He referred to it as the gateway to the unconscious, the sacred threshold between the persona you perform and the truth you suppress. And once you cross it, you begin to see, not with your eyes, but with your spirit. You stop being fooled by masks. You see the patterns behind behavior, the archetypes beneath personality, and the energy behind every word unspoken. Your intuition sharpens to the point where it feels like you're no longer thinking, you're remembering. You walk into rooms and feel vibrations before anyone speaks. Dreams become symbolic instructions. Synchronicities increase. Solitude becomes healing instead of isolating, and silence starts speaking louder than words ever could. You detach emotionally, not because you've lost your capacity to love, but because your love is no longer desperate, no longer performative. It's rooted in clarity. You stop reacting. You begin responding from a place of presence and awareness. And yet, this clarity is not without cost. The opening of the third eye is often described as a gift, but what it really does is dismantle the false self. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This awakening is not about escaping the world, but finally facing it, starting with yourself. The illusions you once depended on start to shatter. The projections you believed about who you are begin to crumble. The ego, once inflated by validation and performance, starts to deflate in the face of spiritual wisdom. You're forced to confront your shadow, the hidden wounds, the unhealed traumas, the suppressed fears. The third eye doesn't just open you to light, it exposes your darkness, and in doing so, calls you to transmute it. You realize that the journey is not about becoming more spiritual in appearance, but about becoming more honest in essence. Intelligence, in this awakened state, is not about accumulating knowledge. It's about embodying truth. You begin to understand that awakening is demolition, not decoration. It tears down the walls you've built to survive, so that you can finally live. You may cry more. You may feel alone. You may even wish to go back, but you can't. Because once you've seen, you can't unsee. And that's the silent contract of awakening. The third eye doesn't just give you vision, it gives you responsibility. Responsibility to live aligned with what you now know, even when it's inconvenient. Responsibility to let go of relationships that no longer match your vibration. Responsibility to walk away from environments that drain your energy, no matter how familiar they once felt. You start to notice that people who once inspired you now confuse you. Conversations that once excited you now exhaust you. You long for depth, for meaning, for realness. And as this spiritual intelligence integrates, you stop trying to explain your evolution to those who haven't yet begun theirs. You realize that true awakening doesn't require external validation. It moves quietly, like a tide pulling you back to yourself. You become less reactive and more reflective. You listen more and speak less. You understand that energy speaks louder than language, and presence carries more weight than performance. The third eye sharpens your discernment and blurs your tolerance for anything that lacks truth. And perhaps the most shocking truth of all is that this awakening was never something you had to chase. It was always waiting inside you, dormant but alive, patient but persistent. It simply needed your permission to rise. If this insight into the third eye awakens something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep unlocking deeper spiritual wisdom together. 4. The dark side. Why many fear it. Most people resist the call of spiritual awakening, not because they don't crave truth, but because deep down, they sense that the truth will demand everything false to fall away. Awakening your third eye is not about gaining magical insight or floating into bliss. It's about seeing what you've spent your entire life trying to avoid. When the third eye begins to open, you don't just gain clarity, you lose illusions. And with every illusion that dies, a part of your old identity dies with it. This is why the path of awakening feels like grief. You grieve who you thought you were. You grieve the relationships that were built on unconscious need instead of true connection. You grieve the safety that ignorance once gave you. As Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That's because facing the soul means facing the shadows, and shadows are rarely gentle. They hold the truth about our wounds, our denials, our false masks, and our silent suffering. Awakening strips away the distractions, forcing you to confront the void underneath the loneliness you numbed with noise, the fear you covered with control, the pain you buried beneath performance. But this stripping is not cruelty, it's cleansing. The pain is not punishment, it's purification. And the darkness is not the end, it's the womb of rebirth. The reason many people fear spiritual awakening is because it doesn't look holy in the beginning. It looks like breakdowns, detachment, anger, confusion, and loss. But these are not signs that you're doing something wrong. They are signs that your inner world is being rebuilt, that the structures of falsehood are crumbling, making space for truth. In this sacred collapse, you learn discernment. You begin to see the difference between love and attachment, purpose and performance, guidance and manipulation. You no longer allow others to gaslight your intuition or your truth. You no longer chase what doesn't feel aligned, and you no longer shrink to fit into spaces your spirit has outgrown. Spirituality, in its rawest form, is a commitment to wake up again and again, even when it would be easier to stay asleep. Spiritual awakening is not aesthetic, it is alchemical. It turns wounds into wisdom, solitude into sacredness, and clarity into power. The third eye doesn't just show you what's out there, it shows you what's inside. It reveals the emotional patterns you inherited, the roles you performed, and the unconscious beliefs that shaped your reality. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's the blessing and the burden. You are now responsible for your own consciousness. You can't pretend anymore. You can't fake connection. You can't tolerate energy that drains you. You begin to live in radical alignment with your intuition, your values, and your higher path. This inner vision makes you sovereign. It makes you spiritually intelligent. It teaches you to honor silence, protect your peace, and follow the wisdom within, even when the world doesn't understand. It is not a destination, it is a daily devotion. And the deeper you go, the more you realize that true vision was never about seeing more. It was about seeing clearly. 5. How to awaken the third eye, Jungian approach. To awaken the third eye through Carl Jung's lens is to embark on a sacred journey of self-confrontation, energetic alignment, and inner liberation. A journey that doesn't escape reality, but penetrates its deepest layers with courage and clarity. Meditation is the gateway, not in the modern sense of calming the mind for productivity, but in the ancient sense of observing without attachment. As you sit in stillness and watch your thoughts pass like clouds, you begin to realize you are not the storm, but the sky that holds it. This still witnessing creates space between your awareness and your mental noise, allowing your consciousness to stretch beyond habitual reactions and into the vast field of presence. Jung never used the phrase third eye, but he deeply understood the unconscious, the unseen dimension where truth, trauma, intuition, and transformation live. And in that space of stillness, you begin to touch it. From this stillness emerges the necessity of shadow work and journaling, not for self-pity, not to relive pain, but to reclaim the parts of you that have been buried alive under shame, fear, or conditioning. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But you're not here to avoid. You're here to see." Through deep reflection and raw self-expression on the page, you begin to meet your rejected parts, your insecurities, your old wounds, your unmet needs, and as you name them, they lose their power to sabotage you from the dark. This process is not glamorous. It's not about becoming a spiritual person. It's about becoming whole. Your writing becomes a mirror, your honesty the scalpel that cuts through the mask of persona to reveal the soul beneath. And in that mirror, you stop running. You stand. Then breathwork becomes your sacred rhythm. Inhaling consciously and exhaling with intention, especially through practices like pranayama, you begin to activate dormant energies within the nervous system and stimulate the pineal gland, a small but powerful center in the brain associated with perception beyond the five senses. The pineal gland is not just a mystical concept. It is a real structure responsive to breath, vibration, and intention. As you breathe, your brain hemispheres begin to balance, your energy channels open, and you shift from survival mode into awakened presence. This breath is your power. It reminds you that every moment is an opportunity to return home to yourself. Chanting Om is not just a ritual, it's a recalibration of your entire being. Om is the original sound, the vibration of the universe before language, before thought. When you chant Om, you are not simply making a sound. You are tuning your nervous system, your spirit, and your consciousness to the frequency of all that is. The vibration travels through your chest, up through your throat, and into your head, subtly activating energy centers, calming the mind, and bringing you into resonance with something eternal. This resonance is not fantasy, it is felt. And when it aligns with breath, awareness, and self-honesty, something extraordinary begins to happen. The illusions fall away. You stop chasing and start seeing. But all of these techniques are nothing if you are not willing to face your true self with absolute honesty. This is the essence of Jung's teaching, that the path to illumination requires a descent into the self, not the curated, spiritualized version of you that seeks enlightenment as an escape, but the raw, honest, unfiltered truth of your being. The awakening of the third eye is not an escape from life. It is the ability to see life as it is without projection, without illusion, without the ego's filters. It's the moment you look in the mirror and recognize all your masks, and instead of clinging to them, you gently set them down. This moment is terrifying because it asks you to let go of everything false, but it is also the beginning of true freedom. To awaken the third eye is not to gain magical vision. It is to dissolve the blindness of self-deception. It is to embody presence so powerfully that nothing false can survive in your energy. Spirituality, when rooted in this level of depth, becomes a daily act of courage. Spiritual development is not measured by how peaceful you appear, but by how much truth you're willing to face. The third eye is a metaphor, a mechanism, and a mirror. It reveals not what is out there, but what is within. And when you truly see yourself, you can finally see the world. Do you feel ready to explore the Jungian path to awakening your third eye? Comment, "I agree," if this resonates with your journey, or "I don't think so," if you see it differently. Let's open the conversation below. 6. The transformation it brings. When the third eye awakens, it doesn't just change how you see the world, it changes the way the world responds to you. Everything begins to shimmer with a hidden meaning, as if life itself is revealing a deeper code beneath the surface of appearances. What once felt like mere coincidence suddenly carries divine orchestration, and you no longer chase meaning, it begins to find you. Synchronicities multiply, not because reality has changed, but because you finally tuned in to the frequency where truth lives. This shift in perception cuts through illusions and exposes the energy behind every encounter, every silence, and every shadow you used to run from. Carl Jung may not have used the language of mysticism, but his psychological wisdom pierced just as deep. His concept of individuation, becoming whole by integrating the light and shadow within, perfectly mirrors the spiritual intelligence of third eye awakening. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung warned, but by making the darkness conscious. And so, this awakening doesn't just illuminate, it confronts. You begin to realize that clarity is not comfort. It's courage. It's the end of denial and the birth of spiritual vision. As you step deeper into this awakening, you begin to shed. First, the distractions, the endless scrolling, the shallow conversations, the people who only knew a version of you that needed their approval. Then come the shifts in energy. The silence that once felt like loneliness becomes a sanctuary, and the solitude you feared becomes your power source. You stop chasing noise and start listening to the whispers within. The old version of you begins to dissolve, not because it was bad, but because it was never whole. The friendships that once fit no longer feel aligned, and instead, you attract souls who see you without the mask, those who have walked the fire and recognize the spark in your eyes. Spiritual awakening demands a level of honesty that makes most people uncomfortable because it asks you to face the parts of yourself you've denied for years. But it is in that reckoning that you reclaim your power. Detachment becomes your sword, silence becomes your guide, and stillness becomes your teacher. You no longer need to explain your energy. You embody it. This transformation doesn't make life easier. It makes you stronger. You begin to realize that intelligence is not about knowing more, but about seeing deeper. Spiritual wisdom isn't found in books alone. It's carved through experience, shadow work, intuition, and surrender. The third eye isn't just a mystical idea. It's the lens of the soul that sees beyond duality. When you awaken it, you're not just accessing vision, you're accessing truth. This truth strips away the ego, peels back the persona, and leaves only what is real. You begin to live intentionally. You speak less, but say more. You walk away quicker, not out of bitterness, but because your energy has become too sacred for chaos. Your presence shifts rooms, not because you seek attention, but because you radiate alignment. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious holds the key to our transformation. And once that key turns, your life can never return to autopilot. You've seen behind the veil, and once you see, you cannot unsee. You either evolve or stay behind. But those who choose to walk this path will realize that the awakening of the third eye isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of becoming who you truly are. 7. Permanent awakening and responsibility. Once the third eye opens, it never shuts again. And that's both the beauty and the burden of spiritual awakening. It is not a temporary insight or a fleeting mystical state. It is a permanent shift in consciousness, a continuous awareness that reshapes everything you know about reality. Suddenly, life is no longer something that happens to you. It becomes something that responds to you. Every interaction, every moment, every mirror reflects your internal state. The energy you carry becomes the blueprint for the world around you. And this isn't metaphorical. It's deeply psychological and vibrational. Carl Jung, who laid the foundation for so much of what we now call inner work, spoke about the unconscious mind as the true driver of our lives. To awaken the third eye is to make that unconscious conscious, to begin living from the truth of who you are rather than the conditioned identity you were told to be. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the armor you built to survive a world that didn't yet see you. This awakening strips away illusion with surgical precision. You can no longer lie to yourself. You begin to see through manipulation, projection, and ego games, not just in others, but in yourself. And that's where the real responsibility begins. Because once you see, you are accountable. You're no longer allowed to play small, to pretend, to project blame onto others. Your spiritual awakening demands emotional maturity, radical honesty, and total alignment. This is not about supernatural powers or secret knowledge. It's about the quiet power of being fully present, fully real, and fully alive. You don't have to preach or prove anything to anyone. Your presence becomes your message. Your energy does the talking. You become a living mirror that reflects back truth to everyone you meet, not by force, but by simply being. In a world addicted to noise, your silence becomes loud. In a culture obsessed with image, your authenticity becomes magnetic. This path is not glamorous. It's not for performance. It's raw, humbling, and sometimes deeply uncomfortable. But it's also liberating. Because once the third eye opens, you can no longer be manipulated by false narratives, including your own. You begin to see how your thoughts shape your reality, how your fears attract lessons, and how your unresolved wounds call in mirrors to help you heal. This is the level of spiritual intelligence that Jung hinted at the power of self-awareness, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. You don't ascend out of life. You descend into the truth of it. Every challenge becomes a doorway to deeper knowing. Every heartbreak becomes an invitation to integrate the parts of you still waiting to be seen. And in this integration, you become whole, not perfect, but whole. Your light is no longer an idea. It becomes embodied. And you realize that the most revolutionary thing you can do in this world is to be exactly who you are without apology, without disguise, without shrinking. So when people ask what happens when the third eye opens, the answer is this: you stop pretending. You start living from the truth. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop waiting for permission and begin choosing presence. And in doing so, you become the kind of person who doesn't need to convince anyone of anything, because your energy speaks louder than words ever could. This is spirituality. This is awakening. This is what it means to be truly alive. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom if this awakens something within you. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss content that deepens your spiritual awakening. Type in the comments, "I deserve to live a financially prosperous life," if you're ready to align your responsibility with lasting abundance. And there you have it, the shocking truth about awakening your third eye, as seen through the lens of Carl Jung. This isn't just spiritual theory. It's a call to look deeper within yourself, to trust the inner eye that sees beyond illusions. If today's video opened your mind or stirred something within, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and spread this wisdom with others on the path. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an awakening insight. Your journey to higher consciousness is just beginning, and we're honored to walk it with you. What did this video awaken in you? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next one. The truth hurts. You're not healing. you're just hiding. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. At Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the hard truths that can set you free, even when they sting. Today, we'll uncover why what you call healing might actually be a carefully crafted disguise, a way of hiding from the parts of yourself that need the most light. True growth is not about perfecting a mask, but about daring to face the shadows you've been avoiding. So as you listen, ask yourself, are you truly healing or just hiding? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. 1. Hiding behind a mask. Too often, silence is mistaken for serenity, smiles for joy, busyness for purpose, and achievement for fulfillment. We convince ourselves that if our outer life appears fine, then we must be fine. Friends see the smile, colleagues see the success, and even family believes we have it all together. Yet beneath the surface, the soul may carry a quiet, unshakable ache, a restlessness that no amount of pretending can soothe. Carl Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the buried, unacknowledged parts of ourselves that continue to shape our lives until we bring them into the light. The shadow is not merely a collection of flaws or failures, but the unhealed wounds we've tried to forget, the truths we've been too afraid to speak, and the emotions we've learned to silence in order to be accepted. We live in a world that rewards performance over authenticity. From childhood, we learn that being agreeable feels safer than being honest, that staying busy keeps uncomfortable truths at bay, and that achieving more will somehow quiet the unrest inside. But unresolved pain cannot be buried forever. It seeps through the cracks in the dreams that wake us in the night, in the triggers that catch us off guard, in the self-sabotage that robs us of the very things we say we want. Jung warned that ignoring the shadow doesn't erase it. It simply allows it to operate in the background, influencing our choices without our conscious consent. This is why people find themselves drawn to the same unhealthy relationships, repeating the same destructive patterns, or feeling inexplicably empty no matter what they accomplish. When hiding is mistaken for healing, the soul is denied its true work transformation. The soul was never meant to live behind a mask. It was meant to be whole. Wholeness requires courage. The courage to acknowledge pain, anger, shame, and grief without turning away. This is not about drowning in suffering. It is about allowing what has been hidden to be seen, understood, and integrated, so it no longer holds power over us. True healing is the process of making peace with every part of ourselves, even the parts we once rejected. When we stop running from the shadow, we reclaim our inner power. The patterns that once bound us begin to lose their grip, and the choices we make start to reflect truth instead of fear. The soul shifts from survival into genuine peace, and life begins to flow from a place of authenticity rather than performance. This is the freedom that comes when we choose to meet ourselves fully. And in that meeting, the shadow no longer hides in the dark. It becomes a part of the light we carry forward. If you're ready to face your shadow and stop hiding behind the mask, comment below. I choose truth over disguise, and let your healing begin. 2. Performance versus authenticity. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet for many, that privilege is buried under layers of roles we never chose. From childhood, survival often meant stepping into an identity that would keep us safe, loved, or accepted, becoming the peacekeeper who smoothed over every conflict, the achiever who chased perfection to prove worth, or the invisible one who stayed quiet to avoid harm. These roles began as shields, ways to navigate an environment where love was conditional and approval had to be earned. But over time, they hardened into masks so familiar we mistook them for our true selves, even as our soul quietly ached beneath the weight of pretending. These identities, while once protective, become prisons when we carry them into adulthood. I knew a woman who spent decades climbing the career ladder, collecting awards, and earning the admiration of peers, only to find every success hollow. She wasn't chasing her dreams. She was chasing safety, silencing the deep-rooted fear that without constant achievement, she would be abandoned. This is the trap of performance over authenticity. You can be celebrated by the world, yet feel invisible to yourself. And in today's hyper-connected world, social media magnifies the pressure, pushing us to present a perfect image, to curate a life that wins approval while hiding the truth of who we are. As Carl Jung warned, when we live through personas built for survival, the soul suffers, because no external validation can heal the longing to be seen as we truly are. Breaking free from these roles demands courage. It asks you to question the very identity you've spent your life maintaining. If you stop trying to please, impress, or disappear, who would you be? It may mean setting boundaries that disrupt your peacekeeper role, choosing rest and joy over relentless achievement, or speaking your truth even when it risks rejection. This is the moment where real healing begins, not when you perfect the performance, but when you lay it down. Beneath the mask, your real self is still there. The self that existed before fear taught you to shapeshift for acceptance. The self that doesn't need to be earned or proven because it simply is. Living from that place transforms life from a constant audition into an honest dialogue between your soul and the world. Recognizing the role you've been playing, understanding why it formed, daring to live beyond it, and reclaiming your true essence is the work your soul has been waiting for you to begin. For while authenticity may cost you the approval of some, it will return to you the one thing performance can never give: freedom. Have you ever questioned if the life you're living is truly yours, or just a role you learned to survive? Share your experience in the comments so others can reflect too. If not, type, "I choose my true self," and let's step into authenticity together. 3. The soul's rebellion. Procrastination, self-sabotage, and the repetition of toxic patterns are not always signs of weakness. They can be your soul's rebellion against a life that does not belong to you. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When your authentic self is trapped beneath layers of performance, people-pleasing, and survival masks, it will resist in ways you may mistake for failure. You delay tasks, avoid commitments, or find yourself pulled back into the same harmful cycles, not out of laziness, but because a deeper part of you refuses to invest energy into what feels false. Achievements, no matter how impressive, feel hollow when they require the betrayal of your true self. You could stand in the spotlight, celebrated by thousands, and still feel the quiet ache of living a life that does not align with your truth. When the mask is still on, the heart cannot breathe. The mind creates pauses, overthinking, distraction, avoidance, not because you are incapable, but because your inner being is guarding you from walking further into a reality that erases you. In a world obsessed with productivity and appearances, we are taught to fight these signs instead of listening to them. We adopt time hacks, rigid schedules, and guilt-driven motivation, yet none of these touch the real wound. You cannot heal while you are still pretending. You cannot fix what is not broken, only misaligned. Every time you silence that small voice inside that says, "I don't want this," you drift further from your spiritual compass. And when ignored, your soul refuses to stay quiet, and it will rebel. This rebellion may appear as procrastination or sabotage, but in truth, it is self-preservation. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, and it cannot happen if your daily life forces you into a role that is not yours. Your delays and detours may not be proof of failure, but proof that you are being redirected toward what is real. Perhaps the resistance you feel is not an enemy, but a message. Perhaps every pause is your soul's way of saving you from a path that would cost you yourself. Healing is not about forcing action through willpower. It is about removing the mask so your energy can flow toward what aligns with your essence. As Rumi wrote, "Try to accept the changing seasons of your soul, even the winters, for without them, spring would not be possible." When you honor that truth, resistance fades, toxic cycles lose their grip, and you move forward not because you pushed harder, but because you finally chose a path your soul is willing to walk. If this message speaks to your soul, don't wait, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments so we can walk this path of truth together. 4. Shadow as forgotten self. The shadow is not an enemy to be feared or destroyed, but the forgotten self, the part of your soul that carries the emotions, desires, and truths you once felt unsafe to express. It is where the unspoken anger lives, where grief hides behind your forced smile, where jealousy quietly brews, and where the unmet needs of your younger self remain unanswered. Over the years, you learned to bury these feelings, believing that if they were hidden, they would lose their power. But the soul does not forget. What is suppressed does not disappear. It seeps into your life in disguised and unrecognizable forms. Resentment that silently poisons your relationships. Fear of abandonment that drives you to either cling desperately or keep others at arm's length. Silent rage that lingers beneath a polite tone, and self-sabotage that blocks the very happiness you long for. These patterns are not random. They are the voice of the shadow, guiding your behavior from the dark. Just as Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It shows itself in the sudden wave of irritation at an innocent remark, in the tightness in your chest when someone touches a nerve you didn't know was there, in the dreams where symbols and strangers whisper truths you cannot quite grasp. It is the part of you that feels left out even when surrounded by love, the part that panics when something good finally comes your way, because deep down it has learned not to trust joy. This hidden self is like a child locked in a room, knocking softly at first, and then louder over time, hoping you will open the door. Each time you ignore the knock, the divide between your conscious self and your true soul widens, and the child grows restless. Your soul is not asking you to be flawless. It is asking you to be whole. And wholeness requires meeting this shadow with presence instead of avoidance, with compassion instead of judgment. When you dare to look at it, you realize that anger, once acknowledged, transforms into a clear understanding of where your boundaries lie. Grief, when honored, becomes a bridge to deeper empathy and connection. Even jealousy, when explored without shame, can illuminate the unlived desires of your life, revealing what your soul is quietly yearning for. This is not the work of quick fixes or superficial affirmations. It is the deep spiritual labor of reclaiming yourself. It means sitting with discomfort long enough for it to speak, listening to the truths you once silenced, and integrating them into your present self so they no longer control you from the shadows. The energy you once spent on suppression becomes available for creation, love, and growth. In embracing the shadow, you are not descending into darkness. You are retrieving the parts of your soul that have been waiting, sometimes for decades, to come home. 5. Facing the shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you spend years building an identity that keeps you safe, stepping outside of it feels like stepping into enemy territory. Many mistake this safety for healing, convincing themselves they've moved on, when, in truth, they've only learned how to hide their wounds more skillfully. The mask you wear might win the approval of others, but beneath it lie the abandoned pieces of yourself, your shadow that hold the very key to your wholeness. True freedom comes not from pretending the shadow isn't there, but from turning toward it, listening to it, and integrating it into who you are. That means opening doors you've kept locked, feeling grief you thought you'd buried, and facing the fear that the parts you've hidden might push people away. In everyday life, this shows up more often than we admit. Someone goes through a painful breakup, and to the world, they seem fine posting smiling photos, filling their calendar with trips, telling everyone they're better off. Yet privately, they avoid certain songs, places, and conversations because they stir feelings they'd rather suppress. Months later, an unshakable emptiness lingers, untouched by all the distractions. That is the shadow, subtle, persistent, and unwilling to be ignored. Sometimes it looks like keeping yourself endlessly busy, so you never have to be alone with your thoughts, or surrounding yourself with people who never challenge your patterns. Carl Jung warned that the shadow you ignore doesn't disappear. It grows stronger, quietly steering your choices, shaping your relationships, and eroding your sense of worth from behind the scenes. The reason facing it feels so dangerous is because your old identity, the cage, is familiar. It might limit you, but it feels predictable. The moment you start dismantling that cage, your mind and body interpret it as a threat, and the discomfort can be overwhelming. Pain, grief, and disorientation are not signs of failure. They are proof that you're dismantling the survival patterns that no longer serve you. This is the in-between space shedding the skin of who you were without yet knowing who you will become. It's raw, uncertain, and deeply transformative, the place where your soul begins to gather back the fragments it lost along the way. In a culture obsessed with positivity, it's tempting to run from this darkness, but doing so leaves you split in two. If you only embrace your light while rejecting your shadow, you'll forever live a half-life. Real growth asks you to carry both the parts you love and the parts you wish you could erase, and to see them not as enemies, but as allies. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to complete you. Every piece you reclaim adds to your strength, your authenticity, and your freedom. The discomfort is not a reason to stop. It is a sign you are exactly where you need to be, walking the only path that leads to real healing. If you're ready to step out of the familiar cage and face your shadow, repeat after me. I embrace my shadow and reclaim my true self. I am free. 6. Self-abandonment. What most people don't realize is that once you become aware of your destructive patterns, continuing them is no longer simply the result of trauma. It becomes an act of self-abandonment. This means you are no longer a victim of the past, but an active participant in your own limitation. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And this is where many people get stuck. They finally see the truth about their patterns, their relationships, and the masks they have worn to survive. But they choose to stay the same because change feels like death. The truth is, it is a kind of death. The death of the false self you have been loyal to for years. It's the part of you that was built to please, to avoid conflict, to survive in a family, a culture, or a relationship that couldn't hold your authentic self. But the danger is this: staying loyal to that false self means you are slowly killing your own potential, suffocating the life your soul was meant to live, and betraying the very spiritual journey you are here to fulfill. Letting go of these old identities requires immense courage, because it means walking away from the safety of what you've always known, even if it was painful. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking into the unknown, knowing you must jump without any guarantee of where you'll land. That leap is terrifying, because grief will meet you on the way down. You will grieve the loss of who you thought you were, the roles you played, and even the relationships that only survived because you kept playing small. This grief is not a sign that you're failing. It is the proof that you're shedding an old skin. In spiritual terms, you are going through a death and rebirth cycle, a sacred rite of passage that transforms you from someone who is unconsciously reacting to life into someone who is consciously creating it. The problem is, many people confuse comfort with healing. They avoid the deep, messy work of transformation by surrounding themselves with distractions, convincing themselves that keeping the peace is the same as being healed. But peace without truth is just a beautifully decorated cage. If you've been hiding behind positive thinking, constant busyness, or avoiding difficult conversations, you're not healing, you're hiding. And the cost of that hiding is enormous. The slow erosion of your inner power, the dulling of your intuition, and the quiet suffocation of your dreams. Spiritual growth demands that you stop abandoning yourself. It asks you to choose the discomfort of truth over the comfort of illusion, to face the pain of change rather than the numbness of staying the same. You have to understand that your soul did not come here to be safe. It came here to be free. And freedom is not found in clinging to old wounds or familiar masks. It's found in breaking the cycle, even if it costs you relationships, approval, or the identity you've worn for decades. As the poet Rumi said, Try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the passing seasons of the year. The grief you feel when you let go is the winter before the spring. It's the necessary clearing before the new growth can emerge. So if you are standing in front of the choice right now to stay the same or to let go, choose yourself. Choose to stop abandoning your own heart. Choose the path that feels uncertain but alive, because that is the only path where your soul can finally breathe, expand, and fulfill its true purpose. And in the end, you will realize that the pain you feared was never your enemy. It was your initiation into becoming who you were always meant to be. 7. Real healing is messy. Real healing is never glamorous or instant. It is raw, unpolished, and often feels like standing in the wreckage of who you once were, sorting through the pieces to see what still belongs to you and what must be released. It is the slow, sometimes agonizing process of dismantling the false self you built to survive. The one that learned to smile while silently suffering, to stay agreeable while quietly breaking inside. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and this pain is the soul's invitation to step into truth." It is messy work grieving the versions of yourself that wore masks, letting go of coping patterns that once kept you safe but now keep you stuck, and learning to breathe in the unfamiliar air of authenticity. In these moments, the soul does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be honest, and that honesty can look like sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and waves of emotions you can no longer suppress. The heart of transformation often reveals itself in the smallest of spaces, the pause between the trigger and your reaction. This pause is not just an empty gap. It is the seed of freedom, the moment where the unconscious programming of your false self meets the conscious choice of your awakened self. In that breath, you can either repeat the same old cycle or create something entirely new. Most people overlook this moment, waiting for some dramatic shift. But the soul often works in whispers before it speaks in thunder. Choosing differently in that pause is where real healing begins, because it is not about never being triggered again. It is about not letting those triggers control the direction of your life. This journey will also take you through grief, not only the grief of losing people, but the grief of losing identities you thought were you. You will mourn the parts of yourself that once helped you belong, but never let you be free. Shedding the false self can feel like betrayal to the life you once lived, but it is not betrayal. It is a sacred act of alignment. The soul will not settle for a life built on performance and pretense. It will demand the truth, even if that truth dismantles everything you thought was stable. Your old armor, once necessary in battle, is now too heavy to carry into the future you are meant to create. Taking it off will feel exposed, but in that exposure, you will find liberation. Healing will test your patience. There will be days when you feel like you have gone backwards, moments when you question if you are making any progress at all. But it is often in those unraveling days that the deepest transformation is taking place. These moments strip away illusions, confront your fears, and reveal the unshakable core of your soul. They teach you that healing is not about perfection, but about persistence, not about being untouched by pain, but about choosing love instead of fear, truth instead of denial, presence instead of escape. And in embracing this raw, imperfect, sacred work, you are not just changing how you live. You are reclaiming who you truly are at the deepest level of your being. Now, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to sit in the stillness between trigger and reaction. In this sacred space, healing begins. Repeat with me. I choose freedom over the false self, and I welcome my true transformation. 8. Remembering the real self. Beneath the conditioning, the roles you've been forced to play, and the shame you've carried, there exists the original self-creative, unafraid, unapologetic version of you that once lived freely before you learned to hide in order to survive. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Yet most people bury that truth under masks built to please others. In childhood, you might have learned that speaking up brought criticism, or that standing out invited rejection. So you made yourself smaller to stay safe. That choice may have protected you then, but over time, it cost you something far greater: the ability to recognize and live as your real self. You began wearing the face the world preferred, and while that role earned approval, inside, you felt disconnected from the soul that once burned bright within you. There was someone who lived like this for decades, always agreeable, always accommodating, the one who never made waves. She was respected at work, loved in her family, and admired by friends, yet every night she felt an emptiness she couldn't explain. Her art supplies sat untouched in a dusty corner. Her dreams whispered faintly, but were drowned out by the noise of meeting everyone else's needs. One day, she finally decided to honor herself and create again, even though it meant losing the approval of people who only loved her for the role she played. The world around her shifted. Some relationships faded, others deepened. But for the first time in years, she could look in the mirror without feeling like a stranger. Carl Jung's teachings remind us that to reclaim the authentic self, we must go through individuation, a process that requires us to face the shadow of the parts of us we've denied or been told to suppress. This is not comfortable work. Peeling away the layers of false identity feels vulnerable, even dangerous at first. You may fear judgment, loneliness, or the loss of belonging. But as you step into your truth, you begin to realize that the temporary sting of being misunderstood is nothing compared to the long, dull ache of living a lie. Approval may be withdrawn, but in its place grows something far more valuable: self-respect. Relationships built on illusion may fall away, but the ones that remain will be rooted in truth. The pain of authenticity is sharp but clean. It cuts away what no longer serves you. The pain of hiding is slow and corrosive, wearing you down year after year. Choosing to become who you truly are may disappoint others, but it will set you free from the prison of pretending. The emptiness you feel is not a sign that something is missing from your life. It's a sign that something is missing from yourself. When you stop betraying your own soul to fit the expectations of others, you open the door to a life that is real, whole, and deeply alive. 9. Freedom through truth. You are not broken. You are buried beneath layers of silence, survival habits, and the stories you've been told about who you should be. Freedom is not about fixing yourself to meet the world's approval, but about becoming real, stripping away the masks and letting the truth of who you are breathe again. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. True spiritual awakening begins the moment you stop running from your pain and turn toward it, even when fear tells you it's safer to stay hidden. Fear will whisper that you will lose love, safety, or belonging if you show your true self. But the truth will remind you that what is real can never be taken from you. You may have spent years building an identity that pleases others, avoids conflict, and keeps the peace. But that peace is false if it costs you your own soul. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is sacred. It is saying, I matter too, and honoring the life force within you. This is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world convinced you to hide. Your soul is like a flame that's been covered for years when you uncover it. The light may sting your eyes at first, but its warmth will remind you that you were never lost, only waiting. Awakening is not gentle. It arrives in moments that shake you. Heartbreak, betrayal, loss, failure. These are not punishments. They are invitations to return to yourself. Life will hold up mirrors through people and situations, showing you the parts of yourself you've abandoned. Healing begins when you stop pretending and speak the truth, even if your voice trembles. The truth will set you free, but first, it will make you miserable. It is uncomfortable to face what you've denied, but those buried parts hold the key to your freedom. To walk the spiritual path of true liberation, you must choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and self-respect over fitting in. Choosing yourself will feel like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. But it is the deepest act of loyalty to your soul. You are not here to live a half-life or shrink to fit into someone else's vision of you. You are here to awaken so fully that no fear, no expectation, and no voice from the past can convince you to hide again. To affirm your commitment to living in truth, declare it now. Comment below, I choose to be real, and let your courage inspire others to face what they've been avoiding and step into their own freedom. And remember, true healing begins the moment you stop hiding from yourself. The shadow you avoid today will quietly shape your tomorrow until you choose to face it with courage. If this message has spoken to you, let it be a turning point. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights on the path to self-discovery and transformation.